Hi folks, welcome to Friday's iWrite Radio podcast. Hat Friday, as you may have guessed. I hope you're all wearing your bonnets. I've got Jimmy Hutton with me and Stuart Lockhead. After much lobbying, we'll go with Nicola's presser because there was quite a lot of information dealt out there. But as I say, after much lobbying, I'm then going to go to Stuart and Jimmy just to decide what they want to do. Read from that what you wish, people. So the press conference, Jimmy.
Aye, so like you say, there was a lot of information today. A lot more money for the arts. We got kind of decent news, I think. That it certainly seems that the clusters that are ongoing in Scotland, all of them seem to be pretty much under control. We got yet more evidence that the press pack in Scotland are daft, and particularly Borders pressers, because they get completely parochial and wonder if an extra 4 cases means it's an outbreak and Dustin Hoffman's going to turn up in his hazmat suit in the Borders. But yeah, testing provision, quite a lot today on that. How there's going to be walk-through stuff. Basically, testing provision is going to get ramped up continually throughout the year. There's going to be plenty of walkthroughs for students to go and visit should they think that they need a test. And yeah, I think it was pretty good, mate. All in all, a wee warning for people at the end, gonna no have a party, just gonna no. So we'll see what happens over the weekend.
What I particularly like about these pressers is that the experts they pick to stand on either side of her are relevant to what's happening in the short term. You know, like the new law for entry for the police. So Chief Constable was there to give his
nice
side.
bit of casting direction.
And the test and trace, Jason Leach is there to talk about that. We seem to be doing pretty well on the test and trace. I'm kind of got my fingers and my toes crossed here. Just in case something goes wrong, but we seem to be doing quite well with that at the moment.
Yeah, well, compared to yesterday's uplift in England, it was nearly 500. We went from about 900 to nearly 1,400 cases yesterday in England.
Is it not really the case, though, that they're ramping up the test and trace? Well, they're worried about a winter wave of coronavirus, but they're also thinking that as things open up, they're going to need to be able to shut down areas quickly.
Yeah, but this was an uplift of nearly 50% in the positive infections.
And
aye,
the numbers in England, Stuart, they've been stubborn, haven't they? They've been around about 1,000 for such a long time. But you're right, that's quite a big uptick in one day.
We assume I think it's more food factories. By the way, you don't want to be eating a Marks and Spencer sandwich at the moment, because the factory that makes them is still running. Half the factory is still running. They only shut down half the factory, even though it's got infections in it. So it's up to you.
Aye, if you're choosing a Marks and Spencer's piece, walk past and go to Pret.
Pret shut.
Is it?
No. They've only let a few thousand people go, mate. Pret when they shut.
But look, the walk-through, I think she's ahead of the curve from things like testing now. She's got walk-through starting today in St Andrews, and I was wondering the other day when she announced St Andrews was the first one. So it's because it's for students. So there's another 6 going to be started before the end of September, and another 5 in October, and they're aimed at students. Clearly,
and looking for 22 in all.
Do you think the first thing's going to be in St Andrews because there are so few Scottish students go to St Andrews University these days?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's a lot of foreigners arriving early.
Think of the money, Jimmy. Think of the money.
And I think the key point we haven't mentioned it yet, Jimmy, either. On you, no. The key point was the question about the possible intimidation of office workers in Scotland, because Grant Shapps, is it Grant Shapps?
Yeah.
Has announced in England that you've got to go back to work in your office or otherwise you might get the sack. he'll deny that, but we know that's what he said. Now,
I wonder if he appreciated the irony that everybody else did, that he was busily telling people to go back to their offices while sitting in his home office.
Well, there you go. And then, of course, the impact of that on Scotland is that, and the First Minister's not going to change her plan. Her plan about offices is she's now going to use what they did for construction. They're going to agree a phased return, depending presumably on the size of the office. Goodness knows, but we'll find out. But of course, the worry is that people will, in Scotland, will get all these messages from over the national TV, national press, that they've got to go back to work and be worried about their jobs. And you'll have employers in Scotland telling their workers, you've got to come in, Grant Sharp says so.
I think you're entirely wrong, Stuart. I think we're now at the point where people in Scotland don't listen to Boris Johnson, Grant Shapps et al. And the reason for that is what the Scottish government doing is a lot closer to what people think should be done.
Well, I hope you're right. I do hope you're right.
I think Norrie might be a wee bit right there in terms of you're right, and the Scottish government are closer to people's thinking. There's just the anecdotal stuff again, but I've spoken to a lot of people who work in offices who have found it a revelation that they are probably just as productive sat in their house doing their hours as they are sitting in an office, and they're considerably happier, a lot of them, because they're not having to do the commute. I think a lot of big employers will take a look at what's been going on this year, and one of the big ways, if they want to hang on to their staff, if there is a massive downturn, one of the big ways could be shutting a lot of the big offices.
Well, I mean, it helps cure the housing problem as well, because you just start converting offices to flats. If they can do it for refugees and the homeless, they can do it for everybody else.
I'm not being funny, Norrie, but it would only take the closing of a couple of major office blocks in Edinburgh to end homelessness in Edinburgh, when you look at just how big some of these places are.
Well, the other thing to think about is everybody with a private pension, because pension schemes put a lot of money into property, and I would imagine commercial office rents are part of what builds up your pension pot.
Norrie, you've just touched on an enormous issue, which look at this. We can't expect our city centres to recover. This new shopping mall, whatever it's called, at the east end of Princes Street, it's been a disaster from the start. It's going to be a huge white elephant. The shops won't be in there. If they do go in there, it'll mean there's been no shops on Princes Street. Oh, it's a huge issue that's coming. It's not just.
I think exactly the opposite. I think the shops are already signed up to go in there. They'll all go in there, and I'm delighted if Princes Street empties, mate, because I think Princes Street's been a disaster area for the last couple of decades, and anything that they do with Princes Street is going to be better than how it is at the moment.
I think Princes Street will end up with tables and chairs.
It's a bit windy, that's the trouble. I think Rose Street, you know what, they've got that partial glass at the Kirkgate here in Leith, partial glass covering. They should do that with Rose Street, all the way down.
I like Rose Street the way it is.
That'd be nice, because you don't get a lot of sun in Rose Street, so you're better off with a wee bit of glass up there, keep the rain off you.
But you know where everybody is.
I need to talk about the police and the power of entry. Because we discovered that quite a lot, actually, from the police. He was useful today. We discovered that they've had 14 or 15 new powers, emergency powers so far. We discovered that the power of entry is the new emergency power for house parties. And that only came about by a process of speaking to the foot soldiers, the Police Federation. But they realised that basically they needed a new law. But also, according to the Chief Constable and the First Minister, these new powers, just generally speaking, particularly the First Minister was talking about masks in shops, just making it a law means people have been complying. And they haven't really handed out an awful lot of punishments. So there were numbers. I'm not going to give you from the chief constable about how many fines went out. They don't look huge.
Well, I think we've made the point that a lot of this is psychological. It's, you're going to go to jail or get fined £1,000. That concentrates the mind. Suddenly it's important. That applies. A lot of this is psychological game playing.
Aye, a lot of it's they're manipulating the public into behaving in the ways that they want the public to behave, and it's worked. You never like to see politicians being proved right in manipulation, but so far, I think we can just about trust the SNP to hand these powers back. I don't imagine that Nicola Sturgeon's going to do an Emperor Palpatine and stay long after she should go and hang on to her powers. I think she'll hand them back the moment they need to be handed back. I'm not so sure about this right of entry for the police, though, because they hate handing back any powers that they're handed.
Well, what I found interesting about that, I don't think that came from the Police Federation, Stuart, by the way. I think the way he phrased that meant it came from the police. And it's just a practical thing. I mean, a lot of people don't realise, but the VAT man, the fire brigade, have got more rights of entry than the police. The police are quite restricted.
Not the VAT man.
The VAT man.
Just oh no God.
The VAT man on commercial premises has huge rights of entry.
People jumping off roofs with the VAT man coming round, don't they?
As do the fire brigade. The police used to quite like to follow the fire brigade into dodgy premises. I often wondered if the false alarm was because they wanted entry. But
I often wondered if it was just an extreme fanboy reaction to your wonderful axe work, Norman.
No. I was never overrun with policemen as fans, I have to say. But the point about it was it's a practical measure. You can't go to somebody's door and say, your neighbour's dobbed you in, you've got 45 people in there. And the guy goes, well, there's no music playing.
And you're not getting in.
To check it.
And it wasn't me.
So it's something that because there's not many government ministers that have been in the police, they would never have thought of.
Can I just say as well, before we disappear away, that there's an infinitesimally small chance that I can't speak as well as the interim chief medical officer, because he struggled so badly to get infinitesimally. He just
that was Jason Leach.
That's what he just said.
He was toiling with it, wasn't he?
Yeah, but he did the right thing.
That's the First Minister.
Very, very 4-letter word instead of a what? How many letters?
Very small.
I'm not going to count it.
I use that when I'm writing. I whether it's just a wee short post or whatever on Facebook or Twitter, you get to these long words and you think, how do you spell that? I'll just put very small. What
was the expression the First Minister used right at the start? Scottish expression. What was it?
Oh, she was very Scottish at one point, and I can't quite remember what it is.
Wasn't it keep the heat though?
No,
but it was on those lines. It was that kind of thing. Oh, the game's a bogey.
Oh right.
She slides into Scots now and again. It's interesting to. I wonder if she does that just to annoy some of the journals for doing South, because she does like to chuck a wee bit of Scots in there.
Well, if they quote that in any of the English papers, I'll have to explain it.
Well, I love her.
The game's a bogey.
I love her West Coast pronunciation of precedent.
Precedent, aye.
It's very West Coast, that. It's not Scottish, because the East Coast is precedent. But over the West.
It's kind of Morningside, isn't it?
I know, it's West Coast. They all talk it. They all use it in the West.
Aye, definitely.
They can't speak right. Right, okay. Anything else out the presser before we leave it? I thought it was pretty good. One thing I did like the way that the Chief Constable kept saying how happy they were with the general population's adherence to the recommendations and the rules.
Well, now you brought him up again. He was good answering the tough question from one of the hyena hacks about the quarantine. Right. Apparently, did you catch that nearly at the end? Apparently, the First Minister didn't want to compare England and Scotland, but Apparently, in Scotland, they managed to contact 1,000 of people flying in from abroad in the most recent week. And across England and Wales, they only managed 1,000 across the whole of England and Wales.
No, she said they were contacting 1,000 daily across England and Wales.
So that's like, instead of being
we're doing that same number per week. Right.
Aye. So we're only 5 times better than them.
Okay. But I just think I think when the chief constable comes across in the way that he did, I think that is vitally important at the moment. You've only got to look across the pond and see just how big a gap is between law enforcement and some members of the community across there.
Yeah.
And we don't have anything like that gap, regardless of the fact that we have a pretty extreme right-wing press who would love to create fissures between the police and the populace. And that's not happening here. I think we need to be rightly proud of that fact.
And the other thing I was going to say, I like the way Sturgeon couches things, because that comment about the 1,000 getting tracked and traced, getting traced for from coming in from for quarantine. That was couched on the back of a compliment to the track and trace teams that are doing it. So she doesn't do, the Scottish government are wonderful. She does our track and trace teams have achieved, which I think is good, both for the people doing the work.
What's his face? Also, Jason as well said there was astonishing work and compliance in Cooperangus. And I think we'd all agree that, certainly me last weekend, I thought that was going to explode, the Cooperangus food factory thing. Yeah. And it just hasn't. The numbers haven't gone up in the way that I expected.
No, I'm really glad that we've got to the end of
delighted this. For that, aye.
We've got to the end of this presser and included that because we apparently have had good results in Aberdeen, good results in Cooperangus. Well, Hoyt should be no problem. Should be a doddle. There's only 11 there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it sort of links back to your point about how you try to get the population to do what you want as a government, and threatening people with redundancies if they don't go back and work in offices.
So that makes, you're right. I'm wrong.
Well, no, I mean, it's not a right and wrong thing. I just think the Scottish government's attitude, the fact that she was being so certain about not using threats, sends a really important message. It's that we care about you. We want you to cooperate in making this work if it can work safely, and it involves people in the narrative and gives them the opportunity to have their say, or at least to feel they're having their say.
It makes people feel that they're connected to their government, something that Tories can't do. Tories can only instruct you. You know what I mean? They think they're they think they're the Rodneys and we're the grunts. They think they're the officers talking down to us, and the Scottish government do not talk to people like that.
Those of you that have never been a squaddy, a Rodney's an officer.
Oh, sorry.
I just thought I'd explain that to the population.
I made at the point, I thought everybody had been a fan of the Stranglers at one point.
Oh, true. Stuart, you had a couple of articles that caught your eye.
Let's talk about the poll behind you then.
Okay.
Which is, I'm not saying it was the most perfect of polls. I'm sure there'll be a little bit of argument about the wording. However, it is a very successful poll. It looks as though it's by Business for Scotland, Gordon McIntyre Kemp, he's practically top of the polls in Scotland for visibility at the moment, because he's very busy.
He's been producing a lot recently.
A lot. I think this poll was done at the same time as the one that's showing 55 to 45% in favour of independence. They asked the same people, I think, 1,100 people, who would you trust with the to run the Scottish economy? Would you trust the Scottish government? Yes, for 70%.
As against Westminster on 30%.
30%. There's your one. Exactly. Look at just they're there on the screen. Sorry, it's some people. A lot of people also listen. They don't all see the screen. You're forgetting. There's still quite a lot of podcast listeners, which is very, very good. I mean, we're now got to the point where quite a lot of people are saying and suggesting. Well, you were saying it the other day. GERS is now a great thing because it's driving people towards independence. And we've now got the strong argument from both left and right. Well, the only person that seems to be out on a wing and a prayer is Andrew Wilson and his Growth Commission and the First Minister, who hasn't swung behind this new mood yet, that the economy, which used to be regarded as the weakest part of the argument for independence, is turning out to be the strongest part for independence.
It was because people managed to plant that seed that we are in the position that GERS demonstrates because of Westminster.
Too poor.
You know, not because of the Scottish Government, it's because of Westminster's decisions that we're where we are.
Yeah, I think as well, Nora, you know, a lot of people have came up with opinions as to why Yes is now in the ascendancy, why the SNP are running so high in the polls. And it clearly, a lot of it is down to trust, and that the people of Scotland now trust the SNP at levels they've never trusted them before. Whether that's down to Nicola Sturgeon's handling of the pandemic, whether it's down to the fact that more people watch Holyrood and they actually think that what happens in Holyrood is a better reflection of Scotland as a country than anything that we've seen coming out of Westminster for the last few years. Because let's be honest, Westminster's been an absolute crazy bun fight since the referendum on Brexit. There's never been anything sensible came out of London since then. It's Punch and Judy politics at its worst. And even, I know we see Richard Leonard and Jackson Carlaw getting absolutely eviscerated at times, but what we also see is a Scottish administration that even when they're making mistakes, they do it well. When they make a mistake, they hold their hand up, admit to it, and move on. And that's...
Yeah, I want to throw in the possibility that it's not just because it's an SNP government. It adds, I think even if the SNP government moves on, people will have confidence in any Scottish devolved government. Simply seeing Scots doing it properly, unlike down south.
Yeah, but your problem is you don't have another Scottish government. The Labour Party would follow Westminster Labour diktat and the Tories would follow Tory Westminster diktat. How could they do otherwise?
Yeah, but I think a lot more people are now open to the fact that, or open to the possibility that Scotland will be an independent country, because more and more people are having those conversations. What would happen in an independent Scotland? Would there be Conservatives? Would there be Labour? Or would there be new parties set up on different lines?
And the other question, of course, is would there be a financial penalty to independence? I think that's the big one that's left. You know, will we struggle to start with? Well, even the unionists, or very few unionists anyway, are admitting that Scotland could be an independent country. The question is now, will there be a financial penalty? And we're now getting quite a lot of economic evidence to say, no, there won't be any financial penalty.
I think there's also that Scottish pragmatism as well, Stuart. We're in a hole already, and we're going to go further doing the hole come Brexit. So
yeah,
we'll be starting for a level where it wouldn't matter if there's another wee done. We'll bounce at some point.
Well, that's the question I've been asking anybody that's tweeting about GERS from the unionist side, with the usual arguments. Can you say for certain that these figures will improve under a Westminster government? And not a single person has even come back to tell me to bugger off.
You can't be, this is true. You can, every accusation these days from the unionists on Twitter, especially, they ask stupid questions because all you do is replace Scotland with UK, and you know, Scotland would be a basket case when you just replace Scotland for the UK, and it's a basket case because they say absolutely stupid things.
I think economics, a lot of people are taking a look at it sometimes and saying, aye, you can actually say economics. It's like, remember the old thing about lies, damned lies and statistics. You can say anything you want about economics. It can't be tested. It's not science.
Well, that's the trouble with, what was it, especially lies. Apparently Trump last night managed 20 lies in his speech. And, I'm not going to show it. I nearly accidentally had a background of Donald Trump looking like Jesus, because they had him lined up in front of a halo for last night's.
I've seen a beauty doing the rounds this week where it looks like Jesus has got his hands on Donald Trump's shoulders. The unfortunate thing for the Trump supporters that keep retweeting it is it's Charles Manson. It's no Jesus at all. It's an absolute belter.
I like that.
Oh dear. I have definitely noticed an awful lot of unionist writers. They're not at the point of backtracking, but they are at the point of excusing Scottish independence. A lot of them talking about, oh, the economic case isn't there, but is the economic case the only case to be made? That sort of line.
Well, that's only if you've been a salesman, Norrie, and I don't know about you, Jamie, but that's how you make a sale. You boil it down. The resistance is there from the customer, so you boil it all down to one single issue. And if I can solve that problem for you, Mrs. Smith, will you buy? And if you can boil this argument at the door for independence to one issue in the economy, if I can prove you'll be better off, will you vote for independence?
Well, that, I mean, the unionists will go on the economy, of course. They always do, because they've nothing else left. Everything else has been blown out of the water or turned out to be a lie.
Do you think the unionist cause will suffer greatly from George Galloway having his Twitter page suspended?
No, it'll improve their chances.
No.
But they chuck so much money at George and all these wee sort of independent unionist sites that they'd launched. For George to get his Twitter page banned is a bit of a...
Do we know why?
Oh, you should have
seen. I think it was that tweet for his missus concerning the anal sex bananas and Nutella, Norrie.
Oh, right, okay.
She lost the plot and put out something about SNP teaching kids about anal sex using, as I say, Nutella and bananas, and a few people put in complaints and it was gone.
Excellent. Okay, what else have we seen today? From a kind of inward-looking perspective, Wings Over Scotland's got a piece about the sad disappearance of some of our favourite indie blogs.
It was an interesting piece.
He did make one factual error, in as much as Peter A. Bell has never left the scene, and Peter produced a blog pointing that out.
However, Peter, apart from that, Peter was generally speaking complimentary about.
I thought it was a good piece. I thought it was a bit. Again, he does the work. He's got the stats at hand, and he can tell you how many people are visiting what sites and what have you. And he's right. Other than him and the Ginger Doug, there's not a lot of people getting a lot of traffic. But
well, there's Bella, Commonweal, Scott Goes Pop.
Oh no, good. Have you seen
Ginger Doug and Wings?
Have you seen Scott Goes Pop? I hope you haven't visited yesterday or today. He's been attacked by somebody he's posting, I don't know, 20 times an hour. The same thing. I'm not going to even refer what it is, but it means it's just you can't read the comments.
They all lose the plot, mate. There was Jeggett posted a decent one this morning, but prior to that, the stuff that he was going on about on Twitter, I'd seriously I'd take a baseball bat to the back of the man's head. He was basically positing that we can expect the parachute regiment to come and shoot people in the streets if we get close to independence.
He's Irish, isn't he?
Well, that's no, mate. He's a West Coaster. He's a Scotsman living in Ireland.
Ah, is that what it is?
Well, I wasn't saying that Scott Goes Pop was saying anything wrong. All he was not doing was moderating the comments.
It's Kelly's position on that has been staunch from the beginning. He he has never moderated his comments. Although he did suggest he might start doing it because people were abusing it.
Aye, I think I just think all the bloggers they all need to take a break now and again, and basically energise, because we know what's coming next year. We know there's an election we have to win next year. It's a campaign we have to be doing well in, and I think we have to go into this campaign thinking that we are going to get a referendum not that long after the election next year, because that's what I'm thinking is going to happen. I think it will be forced upon the SNP.
I know it's that, Jimmy. I know.
It's a bit depressing, that. Can I just throw in that it's worthwhile reading George Caravan's article about low taxes, because that's a more optimistic article than what we're talking about, the lack of indie media, social media.
Yeah.
He said he simply points out that we're currently taxed about 37.5%. And all these other countries round about, Germany, France, Ireland, Denmark, they're all 10 to 15% more taxed than us. There's plenty headroom for an independent Scotland to tax a lot more and invest a lot more and grow the economy.
I think it was interesting that yesterday we seen the big beasts, your Andrew Neils and that, come out and attack anybody that suggested increases in taxation yesterday. I think they were desperately disappointed that the GERS didn't have the effect that they would expect of a normal year. So they just came out and started attacking business for Scotland and what have you. And frankly, I genuinely don't know why people bother engaging with Andrew Neil, nor he called it. He'll just babble, and then call you an idiot at some point. So he's a waste of space.
I have a slight problem with George Caravan. I think independence for George is a platform for his left of centre, let's be kind, socialist views. I have yet to see a solution to any problem thrown up by independence from George that isn't basically a socialist solution.
Well, perhaps you're right, but I don't think he's out there as an outlier on this issue. Let me point something out. I'm old enough to remember, the end of the 60s when I left school and was out in the job market. The taxes in those days were about 40. You only got just over half your wages to take away home, and in those actually walk out of a job, and I mean walk out of it, not plan, just walk out of a job because you've fallen out with the boss, and walk down the street and walk into another job. It's great.
Aye, but you'll never get that again. It's never going to happen again with the way that you've got technology taking people's jobs from them now. And I think that after the 70s, where you had nominal tax rates in the United Kingdom that were horrendous, I think Thatcher has driven tax down to a level that it'd be very difficult for any government in the UK to take taxes up to a level close to like the Scandi countries, for example.
Well, what about France, Germany?
Yeah, but to go from the level we're at upwards would be difficult. You would have to put freebies on the table, and there will always be losers.
I mean, you've got 37.5% in the UK, 45% in Germany.
Yeah, but Germany has not had tax rates at 37.5%. You're talking about the shift, what people see in their pay packets. I mean, if you lose 50% of your pay packet.
But this is total tax. I mean, this obviously George is suggesting left-wing taxes, which I agree with, which is land. The way that we don't tax land properly in this country, it's the easiest thing in the world to tax. You can't fucking hide it abroad. It's there.
Yeah. We've argued about this before, that it's stupid to tax any other way.
You'll never get genuine land tax reform until Scotland's independent.
Yeah,
because the United Kingdom would never consider it.
Oh, I agree with you. But George isn't suggesting this is the United Kingdom. This is a solution for an independent Scotland.
Yeah, and as I say, the debate I want to see is between him and I've just forgotten his name, the man that produced
Andrew Wilson.
No.
Barry Higgins?
No. What's his name from Business for Scotland?
Oh, Gordon McIntyre.
That's the debate I want to see.
Well, I think he asks one question at the end of his article about road taxes. He says, this was asked the other day, the Gers Day, of Kate Forbes, our finance secretary, because she's abandoned plans to produce an annual economic case for independence, which is an alternative to Gers. And this is a horrible own goal that the unionists will use against us. It is particularly silly as the economic case for independence is very strong.
If you implement my plan.
Aye, as long as you go along with George's plan. I didn't agree with that. I think Kate Forbes has done the right thing. Why hand them any information which they can dissect and then use as a weapon against you? I think that's, if you make an economic case for independence, you're jumping through a hoop that unionists have set up for you.
Well, there's two things to say about George's. It was a very bad idea. A, it wasn't her idea. It was Derek Mackay's idea. Mm-hmm. And B, when was she supposed to get time to do the work on it?
Oh, that's very true. There's no argument with that. And I have had to change my mind about Gers being a bad thing, because following what you said the other day and reading everybody else, I've now changed my mind. I think Gers is a wonderful thing.
I've got your Committed Capitalist membership card ready to sign, Stuart.
No, Gers is a wonderful thing because it's like Christmas Day for us Indy people. Nothing to do with capitalism.
It is actually amazing, the turnaround. I started to notice it last year during the Gers pandemic. And the change, that seed that was planted about 3 years ago, I can't remember, it was probably Wings that wrote a piece saying, remember, we have these figures because of Westminster, not despite Westminster's control.
Yeah.
I've watched it grow and grow, and next year the Tories will be screaming and shouting about them publishing Gers and talking about Gers, and the First Minister having too many Gers platforms.
Aye, the Tories will be disgusted because Gers don't take into account the Brexit bounce that they'll be pretending has happened. And if there's a Brexit bounce, it'll be in France, Ireland, Holland. It wouldn't be in this country.
I've yet to get a BBC journalist to ask the question that's pertinent, though. If this shows Scotland's dependent on Westminster, why isn't Westminster creating a situation where Scotland doesn't need to be dependent on Westminster?
That'd probably be far too difficult for them to create. They'd have to go find a convoluted way to blame us for everything.
Jimmy, I believe your next rant has absolutely nothing to do with football.
It doesn't, mate. No, I want to have a little rant about the Crown Office and Procurator, Fiscal Service.
On the Hibs.
The one that enough. Ho, behave yourself. On the Hibs. Have you been on the drink this morning? Anyway, the Crown Office. We have cast aspersions in their direction before about malicious prosecution with Mark Hurst and Craig Murray around the salmon affair. And yesterday, said Crown Office paid out £600,000 as an interim payment to two gentlemen for malicious, what was it? A malicious prosecution without probable cause. These guys were appointed as liquidators at Rangers when Rangers was going down the tubes back in the day. And they're suing the Crown Office for $14 million. And it turns out the Crown Office looks like they're looking to settle. If they've already paid out 600 grand, they're looking to do a wee deal. My worry about it is that the people in the Crown Office who led that malicious prosecution, who knew there probably was no cause for them to do so, these are the people who are still in charge. Frank Mulholland's now a judge. He was the Procurator Fiscal, I believe, at the time. These are the folk that are prosecuting Craig Murray. And if what we're looking at here is a massive bit of nasty sitting at the centre of the legal community of Scotland.
Well, we're the head of the legal community.
We're supposed. We are very rightly proud of having a separate legal system in Scotland, but right at the heart of it, it looks like there are dishonest people who brought prosecution against these guys, effectively attempted to. Well, they arrested them, they detained them, effectively attempted to ruin their career.
What did they charge them with, Jimmy? Can you remember?
They were arrested and charged, and the charges against them were later dropped, mate. It seems that they were alleging all kinds of financial mismanagement in the liquidation of Rangers.
I vaguely remember something about this, but the detail, I probably skimmed over it, to be honest. This was after the tax evasion.
It was not so much that, mate. It was basically Rangers were going bust. Craig White had bought them, and he was quite perfectly happy to put them into administration. He thought he could make a few quid out of it. But these guys were appointed as liquidators, and the Crown Office seemed to think that they were crooked in doing wrong things. I'm not quite sure if Mr. Mulholland is a season ticket holder, but he's certainly been in the director's box a few times at Ibrox over the years.
So your contention is that the liquidators were profiting in some way out of the Rangers situation.
No, that was the contention of the Crown Office, that they were up to something, that something wasn't quite right. What we're seeing here is that these guys, now, doesn't this sound familiar? The Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service didn't provide them with the documentation that they needed to make their case against the Crown Office. Well,
that sounds entirely reasonable.
Seems perfect. No.
Isn't that exactly what they were trying to do to Craig Murray?
But they were shown papers which showed senior Crown Office lawyers speaking about the need to nail the Duff and Phelps people. So it was all about getting the liquidators. It was all about getting these two blokes.
Been watching too much American TV.
I'm thinking that Lord Mulholland might want to take early retirement, and senior figures in the Crown Office, right now, it looks to people out with the legal community that yous are bent, that yous are at it, and that people are showing you to be at it. So unless you can show yourselves otherwise, perhaps you should all maybe consider early retirement too.
I have to say that liquidators have huge leeway under the law.
They got the powers.
I mean, I know of cases where every penny that somebody who's been bankrupted, every penny raised selling their houses, cars, whatever, has ended up going to the liquidators in fees, and nothing has gone to the people chasing the debt. They can do almost anything they want.
I'm just reading
I'm a bit surprised there's a law they can break.
Yeah, well, the Lord Advocate's lawyer told the court the Crown were now admitting liability for wrongdoing in parts of the prosecution. One of them suing for 9 million, the other suing for 5. So, as I say, they paid out 600 grand yesterday, so they're obviously looking to sit down, as lawyers do, sit down at the table and come up with a number that is acceptable to everybody concerned. But if there's been wrongdoing by the man who is now, sorry, what have we got here? Lord Wolf. Who's he again?
Is he Lord Wolf?
Not yet, but he will be.
Lord Mulholland and the Lord Advocate James Wolfe QC.
James Wolfe.
Aye. These are James Wolfe's bang up to his lugs in the Craig Murray thing. Absolutely up to his lugs in it. So if he's admitting that he's a crooked sod, and the Crown Office and Prosecutor Fiscal's Office are having to pay out a big wad because he was a crooked bugger, should he now still be in position? Should Lord Mulholland still be sitting as Lord Mulholland, the High Court judge?
Can I just throw that in as, it's very unfortunate news this, given that there is pressure from down south to handcuff the Scottish legal system. And if the Scottish legal system is behaving as badly as we think at the moment, it's no defence to try and stop London.
Okay, what's actually happening is the Westminster government want to stop people being able to take the government to court.
Judicial review.
They're having an inquiry into judicial review. Now, you can take somebody to court in Scotland under judicial review, and you can do it in England. What this inquiry is looking at doing is changing Scots law and basically aligning it with the English law when it comes to what you're allowed to take the government to court for. The problem is that it's written into the Act of Union that Scots law is independent of Westminster.
And the treaty.
And the treaty is independent of Westminster. So if they go ahead and force a change or claim they can force a change, they break the Treaty of Union. And we're independent. Okay, so let's hope they do it.
Let's hope they do it then.
Yeah, well, I think Joanna Cherry pointed out to them yesterday just what a sugary peg they'd be hanging their Union flag on.
Aye, she wrote to somebody, didn't she?
And I think, mate, the way it's looking, because they're desperate, they hate judicial review, they keep getting beat with them. But I think that the way it'll pan out is that they'll leave judicial review alone in Scotland and they'll alter it in England and Wales, probably Northern Ireland as well. Yeah,
but if they do that, then people will just, like they did, like Julian Mon, they'll just, even if they're based in London, they'll go to the Court of Session in Edinburgh for their judicial review.
It'll keep the Court of Session busy, and it'll probably mean that BBC and ITV have to have an extra court officer up here. Joshua Rosenberg will probably get a wee flat in Edinburgh out of it.
There you go. But all I'm saying is that the defence at the moment, to stop them actually going ahead, I mean, obviously, Norrie thinks they won't, and you think they won't, Jimmy. But I would be a bit worried that if they did want to go ahead, the current state of the Crown Office and Prosecution Service in Edinburgh is not very good at the moment.
It's got nothing to do with them. If the Scottish government says, no, you can't do that, and they find a way to override that, that's when the shit hits the fan.
Well, aye, because at that point they've run a coach and horses through Article 19 of the Act of Union.
But having said that, it's not the first time they've ridden that particular coach and horses through the Act of Union.
Aye, you can take a look at. There's been various
Treaty of Union.
Aye, there've been various acts put through Westminster over the years that effectively have broken the Union. They've broken the Treaty of Union. So
well, they started off by not paying all the money they said they would when they signed the Treaty of Union.
It was a considerable amount, I believe.
Billions in today's money. Anybody got anything to finish with?
Oh, I think, let me see, I might have something over here. What does it say here? Oh, yeah. A guy called Rory Scowthorne. One of the clearest arguments for independence is that the English simply cannot be persuaded to vote for social democracy. Recent strategic debates have tiptoed around the same entirely plausible conclusion about the Scots.
Sorry?
This guy thinks that Scots are actually, the SNP are more like Christian Democrats.
Aye, well, I read the article. I quite enjoyed it, but again, it was yet another Guardian piece that.
Oh, aye, he's a lefty. He's a lefty.
Lack of understanding of Scotland and the Scots, and then I read the wee bit at the bottom telling me that he's a PhD student at the moment, and he's doing his PhD on left-wing politics for the 60s to the 80s. At that point, I thought, Ken Watson, it shows that you're more concentrated on the past than you actually are on what's happening right now.
Oh, and one other thing, apparently Extinction Rebellion, in other words, the climate change people, they're going to bring central London to a halt this weekend. And they don't have permission to have a procession. And we don't know if they'll be locked up.
Personally, I think we should arm our police, get them all out there, shoot anybody that isn't the right colour, and have riots. We're the 51st state, after all.
That might be a tad reactionary, but Ken, what? I'd cheerfully take my baseball bat up to the new offices of the UK government in New Street yesterday. Did you see all that footer and about them? After the hoop march yesterday, they were all up there singing and dancing and making a spectacle of themselves because, frankly, it was the ball bag brigade. It was the, how do I put this politely?
Was it Sean Clerkin?
No, it was worse than that, mate. Sean Clerkin's just a diddy. These people really mean well, but by really meaning well, they were singing and dancing and looking at it. Seriously, they needed... They're the kind of people that might need to be touched by a member of the opposite sex and given a couple of pints. They've not had that for too long, and then they're prancing about. The dancing was awful.
I'm presuming that the hoop demo was a bit of a disaster.
It was a bit of a damp squib, just with the weather and that, mate, and not a lot of people showed up. But there was maybe a couple of hundred in this wee square outside Boris's nice new office.
I can't even remember seeing anything about it.
Well, they were playing things like Amarillo. In that thing that, aye, but a Scottish, and then is this a way to independence? It was cringeworthy in the extreme, mate. And I'm sure these are lovely people, but they need to get ice cream, sugar, maybe a bit of drugs and some drink into them, and just go and do something other than that because it was cringeworthy. And
they need the devil's music.
They maybe need a bit of devil in them, mate. Aye.
Well, the devil has all the best tunes, they say.
Aye, and he's certainly got a drinks cabinet that's considerably better than anything you get for a god botherer.
Well, folks, I think we'll call it a day at that before Jimmy says something that gets us all locked up.
I've probably already done that when I had a pop at the Lord Advocate, mate. I'm waiting for a wee chip at the door. I better get the bat at the back of the door just in case.
Leave your Zoom camera on in case they give you a kick in, Jimmy.
Here's Norman.
Well, I'd offer to rush round, but I can't rush anywhere these days, as you know.
Yeah, that's true, mate. Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Jimmy Hutton. Thanks, Stuart Lockhead. I'm Norrie Stewart. Thanks for listening, folks. And don't worry, we'll get us a squad of leathers round to guard Jimmy's door for the Crown Office. Cheers for now. We won't see you tomorrow, by the way. We won't see you till Sunday, day off tomorrow. But once again, thank you for listening. Cheers for now.